Alrighty, coming at you. We're here with another team review. We got James, Justin, and myself, Vincent, and we're going to be getting into the champion of the league, the new king, as James would call him.
Yeah.
I am your king.
No,
He
you're
autistically screeched that one day, and Dustin said, and it's one of my favorite sleeper messages of all time. He said, "Whoa, king, let me rein you in there."
Hey,
It was one of my favorites. So now the new king
that's
is
true.
the
It is there.
Tatooine
Yeah.
Raiders, and you know, even if they made a trade like his predecessor, the Lambs, did to get into the top three picks, I still think this team could weather it and make it to the title again because this team has a lot of depth, and we'll get into that tonight.
Yeah.
It's one of my
Loaded.
favorite parts of this team.
Yeah. Depth is the strong suit of this team, and quite honestly, that's how Eric survived. A rocky start to the year, right? He was in last place. I'm pretty sure I was ahead of him in the standings with my awful team for a while. He was. I'm pretty sure Alex was even ahead of Eric at some point.
Even the Hurricanes put a whooping on Eric in week 1.
That's right. Yeah, you started him down at the bottom, but he weathered through with his depth, and when some of his guys got healthy late, made the run. So that's how you do it.
Is Eric trying to move into the top 3? Someone here has 2 of those picks.
No. I was making a reference to our guy James Sifu going into the top 3 last year, and kind of his depth is what suffered, and on top of injuries, it kind of withered his team. Whereas I think Eric's team is really super deep,
resistant to that,
and he could kind of I mean, not that he's looking to make a move like that because he would have to be with you or Alex. So I'm not trying to stir the pot or anything. I'm just saying he's got a deep team, and we'll get into that now. So let's see those quarterbacks. I will let I think this is a really great because obviously James is a Bucs fan, so you could talk about Tom Brady. I'm a Dolphins fan, so I could talk about Tua, and Justin's favorite song by Johnny Cash is "Hurt." So Jalen Hurts kind of makes sense for him too. So
what a transition!
James, kick it off with Tom Brady.
Yeah. I mean, geez, what can we say? Brady, wins the title for the Bucs, gets Eric his, second ship as well. Just in typical Tom Brady fashion, he was dominant when it mattered most, especially for Eric. I think it was that week 15, 16 game against the Lions when the Bucs just carved him up. Tom Brady had 30 fantasy points by halftime, and it was still enough. Look, I mean, the Bucs are returning everyone on offense. We're even going to get OJ Howard back. Brady's got the full off season.
All draft picks are there, to my knowledge. So
he's Brady's going to be a top 10 fantasy QB again.
I agree with that.
That's just what it's going to be, right?
Yeah.
He's been there for his whole career. There's no reason to think it's not going to be again. But it's interesting that the big trade that Eric made with Scavelli's team before the year, that Eric was actually able to get Brady from, Mr. Andrews, Scavelli there because, another Bucs fan. But it worked out, and now there's no reason why Eric can't get a second title with Brady as his locked and loaded QB1 again.
Well, Eric was a calculated, we can talk about that trade because it affected so many facets of his team, but that was a calculated move because he gave up the younger quarterback, the quarterback who may be a little bit better now, but will definitely be better 6 years from now. I mean, I would assume, God, I don't think Tom Brady will be here 6 years from now, but
he might be
5 years from now, 3 years from now.
Yeah.
But Russell Wilson also talked shit too. He was like, "Hey, I want to go rebuild the Bears." I was hearing those rumors in the offseason. That was some shenanigans. But enough about that. Eric made a move. He got older at quarterback, but really didn't downgrade in his short-term capability, and he picked up Nick Chubb along the way, and really only cut wide receiver depth to do it with Allen Robinson.
I think it was like Marvin Jones and was in that deal. I
want to say one other person. I can check it on my phone.
Marvin Jones, Robinson.
But either way, it was a great trade for Eric that I really think positioned him to take the title. I think we all agree that if he reverses that trade, I think he makes the playoffs with a better seed, but maybe doesn't win the whole thing, because I think Russell Wilson was front loaded, whereas Tom Brady was more back loaded.
Yeah, and
or just was more like had a bad game, had 3 good games, had a bad
Right.
game, had 3 good games. Fantasy wise, like 18 points, and then has 20s and 30s and a couple 45s. I mean, I think I looked at it. He had like 3 or 4 45-point games in the season, so he still has some really high end potential. That we are all still looking for.
But then, also we talked about Russell Wilson being better, you presume, in 5 years, something like that. But Russell Wilson's no spring chicken. He's going to be 33 this year, and he gets sacked more than any quarterback in America.
That's definitely a factor, is how much he gets sacked. I mean, I was just kind of going with the new wave of every quarterback is really finding a way to play into their late 30s now and at least be competitive at it, especially the guys on that elite level like him. So that trade was very simple for Eric. He picked up Chubb and Brady, but
Chubb, of course.
I can't argue. We can't argue with either of those. We touched on that. Marvin Jones, Russell Wilson. Oh, that's a good one. We talked about Allen Robinson, Robbie Anderson.
Okay.
A different son, if you will. Robinson, Anderson. And then also a 2021 third-round pick. So apparently Scavelli gave that pick to Eric, too. Or Eric gave that pick to Scavelli. So Scavelli will be picking on Eric's behalf unless he traded that and we don't know it. But so still, that was a good move. And that kind of writes the book on that trade, too. That's kind of all we need to discuss on it. I think it was a great move. So, Justin, Tom Brady, you have anything else you want to say on him? Coming from a Patriot fan yourself.
Well, first of all, I'm more than willing to call him what he is, Bucs legend Tom Brady.
Yes.
It has to be said. I mean, as someone who's watched him for his entire career, and we all have really, but I was honestly just so happy to go and see him win somewhere else. Just the fact that he could do it at that age with a different team with no offseason is just, it's one of those things that if you're a sports fan, I think you just have to love it, right?
At this point, yeah. Like I feel like I'm still dreaming as a Bucks. I got to pinch. Like, are we alive? Like I don't even. No. Well, I mean, obviously, the hate from Dolphins fan here. The only time, times I remember like rooting against Brady was when earlier on in his career. But then by the time we all got older, and it's like, man, this guy's still doing it. Like you start to just say, all right, this guy's just got it, and he puts the work ethic in.
Dude, I said Justin to talk about him. You already sucked his dick. I'm asking for Justin.
Come on,
I want to bounce it over to you. Enough about it. All right, we're moving on.
This is what happens to the culture of the team when Tom Brady gets here.
Well, I already gave you the floor to suck Tom Brady's dick. I was asking if Justin wanted to say anything more about it. He bounced it. He threw it right back over to you for the dick sucking. So enough about that. Let me hop on Tua's little knob for a second. I think it's Eric got him in the third round. I think it was 3-1 or it was like 2-10 maybe, but it was very late.
And I wanted him
3-1. Yeah, I remember. I think it was from last night. It was 3-1. So that's a great pick. That's a solid pick. Still has a ton of upside. I think the Dolphins have proven that even if they give up on a quarterback like Tannehill, that he could still have top 10 quarterback top 10 quarterback upside literally anywhere else in the league. So I feel good about Tua, going forward for at least the next 2 to 3 years. And I think the Dolphins are going to surround him with weapons like Jamar Chase. And that's also another good player. Even if they get Devonta Smith or someone he's comfortable with from Bama, I still think there's a lot of upside. Enough upside that while you have a guy like Brady, you have no issue starting Tua for 2 to 3 games a year if anything happens to Brady or something.
Sure.
You guys disagree, agree?
No, I totally agree. I think, and we talked about him during the season quite a few times. Like, he had the flashes of brilliance, and then he had some moments where it looks like he just wasn't, making the reads and making the throws and being willing to push the ball down the field. But I think to your point, for fantasy purposes, he's totally viable if they're going to be committed to him to put him in if you need him for a game or two here or there. And he for every intents and purpose should be able to develop. And if he can't develop in Miami, like you said, he can go somewhere else.
Well, I mean, we were rebuilding, if you remember, as early as the Laramie Tunsil trade. We were tanking even, if you will. So this team he's come a long way. And I think the spots that we really have the most to grow were on the offensive side with playmakers and offensive line. And I think that was obviously, those will be the things that benefit the most and were to his detriment the most in like the Denver game where he really shit the bed and stuff like that. So yeah, anybody have anything else to add on Tua?
Yeah, I'll jump in here for a sec. I think both Tua and Hurts, we can kind of talk about them. Like I think both teams need to surround their quarterbacks with weapons, right? Like the Eagles don't have much at the receiver position. The Dolphins, Devontae Parker is a nice receiver, but as a Dolphins fan yourself, you know we've talked about
I would say
how
he and
much
Rager are a wash. Rager was a first round pick who
Park.
is kind
Okay,
of
that's
like, hasn't fulfilled his potential, whereas
yeah,
Parker, we kind of seen what he is. He's a big play guy here and there, but he's not going to be a consistent one in the NFL. So I would call them a wash unless Rager breaks out or declines. And then that's why I think both teams are in the market for a wide receiver
yeah.
one. And I wouldn't be shocked if either ended up with Smith, Waddle, and obviously the Dolphins more than likely will have a shot at Chase, not the Eagles.
No, but the other kind of comment and point I want to make here is, the way it's listed here, Hurts is listed as a second quarterback, Tua as a third. It's semantics. I do see Hurts though as this team's QB2. I think Hurts has a little more upside with, like the rushing ability, right? He's obviously he's a running quarterback a little bit. The Dolphins have a more conservative offense. Let's be honest, like the way they want to win games too with Brian Flores and the defense, whereas the Eagles I feel like are still going to be kind of spinning.
Well, the Eagles
in
are
circles
rebuilding
again. Yeah, the Eagles are way more rebuilding. So
that's why I'll tell you,
fantasy wise, I do see Hurts as this team's QB2, barring if the Dolphins get Chase and Harris. Maybe I'll rethink it. Justin,
I do agree with James actually, but I think it's because we have such a small sample size from both. Tua played in 7 games and Jalen Hurts played in 4 games. And, in those games, Jalen, I think they both had flashes of brilliance, to use the phrase again, but Jalen had a little more consistency, especially with the run game that the Eagles gave him leeway with. And I think they've shown the Eagles that they're going to commit to him now. And I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity in the offense, despite how bad it is, just to, get some garbage running yards to have a consistent floor. But that being said, that could flip so easily. And it's so hard to make an analysis when we're talking about a combined 11 games of play time.
Quite frankly, I think you're both fucking wrong. And I think the Eagles are going to draft a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. And you guys are going to be like, oh shit, fuck. God damn, I didn't know that Hurts wasn't that secure. So and we're all going to be saying like, God damn, they probably should have taken an offensive lineman instead.
True. So you don't buy the ESPN theories that the Dolphins are going to be the ones taking the quarterback, not the Eagles.
No, that was actually your boy Skip Bayless who said that. He said the Dolphins.
I've heard a bunch of the national guys say it, but yeah, he's one of them too.
Yeah, he said that the Dolphins should take a quarterback at 6, which is like, why wouldn't we have just stayed at 3? That doesn't make any sense.
That's true.
But so that makes no sense. But we're not going to get into that. I think you're both. I would put in the Dynabook right now that Tua has a better career than Jalen Hurts. I'd put it in the Dynabook right now. I'd even put this year is better for Tua than Jalen Hurts. Put either of those in the Dynabook right now. It's on the podcast live. Definitely disagree with you guys, but that's okay. Either way, Eric is going to ride it out with either of them. Let's move on to the running backs.
Well, do we want to throw a quick grade?
I think that all being said,
grades.
Yeah.
You have something to say, Justin? He's breaking up for me.
Good young.
James, is he breaking up for you? Or is it just me?
Yeah. Got a little.
He's frozen on my screen, and it's a little
frozen.
I'm gonna hop in here just for Justin and see if he can get back on track here.
Yeah, we'll give our grades while we wait.
Yeah,
for the
I'm not gonna say shit, but y'all just keep going.
Yeah, Eric's here. He's listening. He's stalking us. That piece of shit.
Yeah, for grades, I'll go with just a B plus. I think it's. In fact, I think it's a solid, obviously group. You got the stud QB1 with Brady, and then you got 2 high upside guys there. Like whether like we could sit here and bicker who's better, who would have this. The fact is, they both are, young quarterbacks, and I could see either one turning in QB1 seasons. So B plus for me.
Yeah, I'll he is a low end QB1 in Brady. As someone who I think is probably going to be between 15 and 7, 6. So like that's fine. And then he has 2 young guys, so that's a B plus for me. If Brady was 7 years younger, it'd probably be an A. But we're not there. So that's why it is what it is. So I think that's definitely a B plus. Justin, B plus. What I'll go with.
Sorry, Eric kicked me out.
He didn't like your analysis.
He hated it. No, I would say it's a B plus too. I don't know where I got cut off, where I got disconnected, but I think that regardless of whether we're going to argue Jalen or Tua, like they're both, good young guys to have on the roster, both with a bunch of promise and potential, which is great to have young players like that in a dynasty league backing up someone who's a surefire, I think, top 10 fantasy quarterback, at least for this coming year. So I think that's prime B plus territory. I agree.
So yeah, let's move on to the running backs. Alrighty, where to begin? Justin, you maybe want to start with Nick Chubb, because Barkley I feel like is an adventure discussion, but Nick Chubb it's all roses and daffodils right now. So do you want to take the floor on Nick Chubb?
Sure. I think, am I wrong that, no, we just talked about this. This is from the Scavelli trade. This is, he was another, again, he was great this year. He's been great every year in the league so far.
He was literally RB9 while missing four full games.
I was going to say, my notes say he was 9 playing 12 games, and despite the fact that he only played 12 games, despite the fact that he only played 12 games, he still had 12 touchdowns, which was his most in his career so far. Despite playing his fewest games, he's only improving. They're only trusting him more with the ball. I think he'll be a top 5 running back this year, as well as probably a top. I think a top 5 running back dynasty asset.
I'm going to go a little short of calling him a top 5 dynasty asset, only because I will actually say he's a top 3 runner in the league, but I will say it's where his game is kind of limited. He doesn't really get a lot of catches, but doesn't really get a lot of targets.
Is it limited though because they like to use Kareem Hunt there, or do you think he doesn't have the skill set?
Does that not factor into the name of the game? Kareem Hunt's going to be there for a while.
No, it does. No. I'm hypothetically asking you. Do you think if Chubb had more work in the passing game, if he'd be able to do it? Yeah.
I think he's able. I think it's like the Adrian Peterson situation where it was like kind of he didn't really have to catch passes until kind of the later years. He caught them a little more than he did. Like Brett Favre kind of came along and it was like, oh, this is a facet to our offense we can kind of unlock if you catch the ball.
Yeah,
and he was Stonehand Peterson kind of for a while. Because that and fumbles, he was letting them go all the time. But I do think he's a complete player if he needed to be, but I do think Kareem Hunt factors into it on the passing downs, as in addition to having 2 really good pass catchers in Odell and Jarvis, with pretty serviceable tight ends as well with Hooper and Harrison Bryant. So there's a lot of mouths to feed there, but make no mistake, the running game goes through Chubb, and I believe he is a top 10 dynasty running back. So that's why
their offense goes through Chubb.
He's top 5 to top. Right? Goal line.
The Browns' offense, I would argue, runs through Chubb. I don't care that they have Odell and Jarvis. Like Chubb that's what they want to do.
He's the whole running game, and what the running game is 50%. Any good balanced team, it's about 50% of your game plan. So yeah, I mean, he is a give or take about 40 to 50% of their game plan. He also, look, I'm looking at this right now. In every game he played, he had a touchdown in every game except 2. And it was against Baltimore, which is a tough one, and Philly, where he still had 100 yards rushing. So in every other games, he had at least 1 touchdown or multi-touchdown. So I think he's an excellent guy. James, you want to maybe take it? We all agree. Top 10 dynasty running back on Chubb, right? Close the book on him.
Saquon?
Saquon, take the floor on Saquon.
So, all right, so where I actually want to start on Saquon is on the heels of the podcast yesterday and, talking about the draft picks, Sean's first, foray back into the league, traded the Saquon Barkley pick. And it was startling that like Sean actually hit on all of those picks on that initial trade. And, Vince, you and I were strong voices of, hey, should not have passed the Barkley, generational talent. I remember I tried to even trade up to get him. I offered Christian McCaffrey before he broke out. The point is, no, with Barkley,
I know, but it would have been so bad for you.
It would have been so bad with, but now, here we are 3 years later with Barkley, and it's like the injuries are starting to pile up, and it's like, man, the Giants still haven't given him his next contract. So the Giants are telling him, hey, prove it. Like they went out and signed Devontae Booker, not to steal carries from Saquon, but as an insurance of like, hey, we need like a back that we like more, because they don't want to be left with the Wayne Gallman carousel again.
He's not even there.
He's not even there. Yeah, they let him walk.
I don't remember where, but it was
49ers.
Random.
49ers.
There you go.
But with Saquon, look, if he's playing and he's healthy, he's another top 5, running back. And Eric's got two top guys. It's just with Saquon, it's always going to be the health. And quite frankly, the Giants offense is not very good still. Like,
No.
I don't believe in Daniel Jones. Their offensive line is still trash. Nobody really trusts David Gettleman to do the right thing. Saquon's been good despite all of these things around him.
When he's been healthy, of course.
When he's been healthy, of course.
Right.
Yeah, he has that kind of that great rookie year, and obviously his pedigree as being a kind of freak of nature that really keeps him in the discussion. So now I kind of brought them both up and asked you for one and you for the other. Who would you rather have right now? All things even, not for your team. Just if you're just right now, hey, you're starting your team fresh. You have this one pick. These are who you get, either or. You're starting with Saquon Barkley. You're starting with Nick Chubb. So let's start with James.
Well, I'm probably a little biased because with how bad Barkley fucked me in redraft. I also think Chubb has been more reliable. I'm going to go Chubb. I think he's the better hold right now.
I agree. I just said 7 minutes ago that I think Nick Chubb is a top 5 dynasty running back. I think Saquon is in that same conversation, obviously, but I think just my nature as a fantasy football player, I tend to be a little more conservative, and I think Chubb is the safer player going forward. He's in the better situation. I personally think the Giants, offense, was anemic all year, and they were. I know it's hard to it's apples and oranges when he's there versus when he's not there, but they're bottom 5 in rushing attempts and bottom 2 in red zone offense and touchdowns. And
he's in a contract year too, I believe.
Right. Yeah. I'm expecting positive regression if he could stay on the field, but I'm still tempering my expectations because of how bad the Giants are as an offensive unit. And I don't have that same concern with the Browns, and I don't have the same injury concerns with Nick Chubb that I have with Saquon Barkley. I love Saquon Barkley, but I think Chubb is the safer player to have moving forward.
Yeah, I think you both make excellent points, and I think there is a slight tick on Chubb just because he's seen the field a lot more, and really just put it all down there a couple of seasons in a row, and you just can't argue with production like that. But Eric doesn't have to make that choice. He has both. So
yes.
The next character is another really interesting guy on Eric's team. Someone that kind of saved the season. Eric got the waivers, got him, picked him up, and he really
quite honestly
changed the year for Eric. And he was
the MVP probably of Eric's team last year. He had no running backs for a couple weeks, and James Robinson was carrying him.
Yeah, he was the number 7th running back overall.
It's so impressive to come out of nowhere.
Very impressive. His game is not really, there's not really much to say about his game because he was a pretty fucking damn fine player for where he came from and what he did on an awful team. So let's really talk about the boiling question with him, which is he doing it again? Is Urban Meyer trusting him as the lead guy, the sole guy? That was a sinking lame duck ship. Is that going to be, are those carries available for a guy like James Robinson? James, what do you think?
I think the Jaguars are going to draft someone. Now, the question is, how many carries will that guy siphon from Robinson? And I think early on, I think Robinson will have a starter's workload. But if he, let's say he pulls a hammy or pulls a groin or gets nicked up and misses a game or something, and someone comes in, we always see if, the regime that drafts the running back, they may just say, fuck the previous guy. That team was 1-15 last year. Fuck this guy.
He has no money invested.
He has no money in him.
Right. Draft capital.
And kind of to your point, last year was a sinking ship for the Jags, so they didn't care. They just, hey, this is one of the few players that's actually producing and playing well for us. Take the ball, man. Just keep going.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening again this year. He's going to be a fine RB3 for Eric's team for this year. But if we had this podcast again this time next year, are we saying the same thing about Robinson? I'm not convinced.
No, he could be the next. What was his guy? The name from Houston. Slayton, was it?
Steve Slayton.
Steve Slayton.
Or I was even thinking what about like an Alfred Morris, where he was great his first year or two, and then you kind of
Alfred Morris is almost a best case scenario. I said Steve Slayton as a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
There goes someone coming in right there. I think that was Eric with the comment.
Yeah.
So Alfred Morris' career arc, I think, is a really an upside guy, and he could be even better than that. Because Alfred Morris wasn't the best. I think a worst case is a Steve Slayton, who kind of had that one great year. And I think, what did Christian take him in the draft years ago, or was it you, James, who took Steve Slayton
in the redraft? In the
redraft,
I had Steve Slayton and Brandon Jacobs one year. That's a real throwback.
Jesus.
That was my round 1, round 2 selections.
Either way, though, still found money for Eric, so that's
Yeah.
nice.
And
Justin, you
that's
have anything you want to add on Robinson?
yeah. I mean, I think James and I are on the same wavelength tonight because the first thing that came into my head when you asked the question was it's his job to lose. And I think it's possible that he loses it. But I agree with James. Like they're going to treat him as a starter regardless whether they draft somebody. But one hammy pull, one fumble, like whatever it's going to
Yeah.
be, it's his job to lose. Because to your point, he doesn't. There's no real investment in him. And I think it's also a great reminder of just this player in general of how hard and speculative this whole process can be. When he was drafted by Eric as a late third, I think, and then
it was in our supplemental draft.
The third in the supplemental draft.
Yeah, okay, yes.
And
it's like a 7th round pick.
Eric dropped him, like fuck this guy, and then our guy Alex Morales added him, and then dropped him again, and then Eric picked him up, and that's all she wrote. But despite Jacksonville being in the bottom of every major statistical category on offense, I think if he can keep his job, there's nowhere to go but up. But that's the question, right?
That kind of is the question. It's just about carries and commitment. I think that Jacksonville at this time next year, we could be talking about James Robinson gearing up for an Arian Foster type career. Even I think that's maybe the highest upside undrafted guy you could really think of without the injuries, of course. But at the same time, if something ever happened to James Robinson for whatever reason, it could be turned off like a faucet, and Jacksonville could be the next hot spot for a running back next year. However, that's all worst case scenario. We'd be being real assholes predicting that. Right now, like I think Justin said it's his backfield to lose, and they could bring in a late round guy to keep him honest, but I still project him to get the lion's share of the workload, at least going forward to start the season. So Melvin Gordon, I actually am maybe less high on Melvin Gordon than a lot of people. I told James while we were playing games the other day that I think that Melvin Gordon and the Broncos could draft a running back. I think the Broncos could take one early.
To, right?
But but I think they could take one early.
Oh, okay.
I think a second or third round running back is in the cards because Melvin Gordon, I believe he has 1 year left on his contract, maybe 2. But either way, it's a 2-year contract, $16 million. So this is the last year of that deal. So they don't have any money committed to him. He could really ride the bench or be a third down guy if they find the running back in the future. It could be a sneaky good spot for a late first running back, mid first running back, maybe even early second if it's like a third round guy. But either way, Melvin Gordon I think still will have value for Eric, at least as a flex player. And as an RB4, I think that's fine. Anybody have anything else to add on Melvin?
I think it's great to have as an RB4. I don't expect him to be as good as he was this year. I think this is like the second time in his career he's played all 16 games, and he was like RB14. I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the sideline at some point because of an injury, and I think that just goes into the overall analysis of, combined with the fact that it's the last year in the contract, he's 28 years old. I think it's highly likely that they draft somebody. So I don't think that he's gonna. I think that we might have seen, his ceiling as far as the future of his like fantasy career goes.
I agree with that. And I think kind of honestly, I think that we can kind of tie these guys together because I think it spells not even these two is Carlos Hyde and Kerryon Johnson. I think also their best fantasy days are behind them as well. Carlos Hyde had a pretty serviceable career, but
absolutely. Kerryon's kind of a disappointment for Eric's team, I think, because like that was a guy that I know he liked, and I believe he was like a maybe early second round, like 2-2, 2-3, something like that.
Eric, you know where you drafted him at? If you can put it in the chat whenever you can, but we'll touch on it if he gets us 110. So 110. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty early for a running back. We talk about the window yesterday about running backs is like if you can get 3-4 years out of solid production out of running back, you're doing good. And I would say you didn't even get that. You didn't even get half a year over 4 years, 3 years.
Yeah, like he had one chance to be the starter. Like I remember I had him in redraft and I was like excited for him. And it was underwhelming. Like he just never, like the Lions never really showed a commitment to give him the ball more. And even last year when Swift is hurt and struggling with injuries, they're giving the ball to Adrian Peterson, and I'm starting him as my freaking RB1
hard times on your
hard
team.
times. But like I was like, oh great, like the Lions hate Kerryon Johnson. I'll start Adrian Peterson. But the like Kerryon my favorite son. It's like
Eric.
He seemed like one of those prospects that had like the size, the speed, a lot of those things. Just some injuries and just not a whole lot of production. It feels like the Lions have kind of moved on from him. And I mean, hell, they signed Jamal Williams. They have Swift. Kerryon's kind of an afterthought on that team right now.
He is. So this is a solid. I think really Ty Johnson's not worth talking about either because he's the RB3 on the Jets once they draft someone.
So they're gonna.
I think this is a stable of really 4 running backs with 2 borderline cut guys. I mean, maybe you keep them because they're running backs. So maybe you hope they latch on mid-season and can get 10 to 15 carries somewhere. Someone gets injured. But for the most part, you got 4 running backs, 2 excellent ones, 1 who could be excellent, was excellent. The only question really is if the new coach commits to him. And then a kind of over-the-hill guy, but is still serviceable for at least 2021 season in Melvin Gordon. So let's give this unit a grade. Justin, what are you thinking?
This is a hard one because the players are so the disparity between the high highs and the low lows is so large. Like we're talking about Saquon and Chubb. I would, they're great players to have and they're great dynasty assets, both of them, I think. And, James Robinson has that potential and Melvin Gordon is still a serviceable player, like you said, but that's kind of stops there. So if nothing happens to any of those guys and he can have all 4 of those guys all year, then sure, it's a great stable. But if something happens to 1 or 2 of them, like there's not a ton of depth here, in my opinion. After those top 2 guys. And so we've seen Saquon's injury history. We've seen Melvin Gordon's injury history, and he's a little older too, or himself. I would say though, but that just by virtue though of having Chubb and Saquon, that it's a B+.
Yeah, I mean, not to keep that quarterback grade the same, but I was going to go B+ too. I'd really like to see more depth to give it an A because the top end's there to give it an A if the depth was there. And that third James Robinson, this could be an A by the 4th game of the season. If James Robinson starts the year with 80 carries over 4 games, then we're going to be talking about this is a rock solid A because you have 3 RB1s. And of course, if Barkley's injured by that 4th game or not injured by that 4th game as well, if he's healthy, I'm not really worried about Chubb. And James Robinson gets the carries, then will have the upside to be A, maybe even A+ unit if he has 3 RB1s.
Agreed.
That's an A+ if he turns out. But that's the best case scenario. I think worst case scenario, you got an RB1 in Chubb if Barkley's injured and James Robinson ain't the guy, and then maybe your spot starting Melvin Gordon. But that's like a worst case scenario. I think B+ is the grade I'm going to lock in here, James.
Yeah, wow. I guess I'm more bullish or just so jaded by my own running backs. I'm going with an A here. I think it's hard to not give this group an A when you have Barkley and Chubb, 2 guys who could easily finish the overall RB1 this year. Like no team, not many teams in our league have that capability to have their top 2 guys. Either one we could realistically see be the RB1.
That is true.
So then let me ask you then. Let me pose a question.
Sure.
Would you rather have Sean's running backs or this one? Sean has Jonathan Taylor, Clyde. He has Raheem Mostert. He has what's his face too?
Mike Davis and some of those other assets. No, I'll take this room. I'll take this room for sure. No question. Because like Raheem Mostert is older than Melvin Gordon, right? Like like we're right. So like
his running backs though are younger. The two they're studs,
younger, but it's not like Chubb and Barkley are 29 years old.
They're 24.
They're still in the prime of their careers.
Oh, I know. No, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So,
I'm just saying, like those guys just got here, so you're projecting at least a couple more years.
No, that's fair.
I think they're comparable units to me because it's kind of like 2 guys that kind of set the room together. The real wild card that I take Eric's team is James Robinson. Because he's better than Raheem Mostert, and he's going to be better than any other RB3 likely that Sean would have on his team right now. And that's the thing. But Jonathan Taylor is debatably the best dynasty asset. I personally don't believe that, but if you go to any other website, they'll tell you he's a top 3 dynasty asset.
I just can't get on board with that.
I'm just telling you that's what it is. There's a lot of people that would rather have him and Clyde over those two. They say, "Oh,
I think
Chubb
that's
with
just buying.
split time and Barkley being
Yeah,
injured." I
think
think
it's
you guys are more on these two players, and that's what gives it to you. But I could see an argument for Sean's
Yeah.
running backs over this room.
that's fair. I don't know.
I think it's also a different way to look at that. Also, is doesn't Sean have like 5 more running backs than this?
Well, he has
part
more
of-
depth that I didn't
yeah,
really get
part
into,
of
like
depth,
Singletary
part of my
and stuff.
analysis is like we've seen Saquon's injury history. We know James Robinson can be questionable. We know Melvin Gordon can be questionable. And if one or two of those, if these guys have, God forbid, a Louisiana Hurricanes type year where every player gets hurt or doesn't want to play the game of football anymore, then the running back room is in trouble.
Well, I brought up that scenario. That's why I said by midseason this could be an A when a lot of those things get dispelled. But until then, at this moment on April 26, 2021, before the draft, I have to call this a B plus because it has that upside to get to an A, but it also by this time next week the Jags going to drafted a 3rd-round running back, and we're sitting here talking about like, ooh, is that guy going to cut into James Robinson? Yep. What are we doing about that? And then it's a completely different room. Again, Saquon Barkley has had 2 injuries that for almost anybody else we would have written them off in a lot of different ways, but because of the freak of nature human being, the draft stock, and all those goddamn awful Gatorade commercials, we keep him around in our mind. And again, we know what we've seen from him. But Saquon Barkley could have another season ender this year. It wouldn't shock me at all. He's had 2. So if he had another one, what are we going to do? Are we then seriously going to talk about that this room is better than Jonathan Taylor and Clyde, who at least still have 3 more years on their contract? Clyde with a 5th-year option. I still would take Eric's room, but I brought that room up because I think they're more similar than you gave it credit for. Also because Sean has way more depth in that RB 3 through 7. I should say more like 4 through 7. Yeah, I think Eric wins with the 3 in Robinson for now.
The key here for this room is going to be what do the Jags and Broncos do to address their backup running back need, because neither team has an answer at backup running back right now, right? So we know they're going to do something. How high of draft capital is invested there? And I think that'll determine, I could be convinced maybe to drop my grades like to an A- and some of that. I just do have a hard time giving this room anything less than an A- when we're talking about Chubb and Robinson both finish inside the top 10, and Barkley, we know what he's capable of. And even a guy like Melvin Gordon, like, it's an unsexy sort of player, but until the Broncos do replace him, he is a starting back on at least a team that a lot of us think could take a step forward this year. So
we could have a very different conversation about this room 5 days from now, let alone 5 weeks into the season. So
no, this room. That's why I feel like B plus is the conservative grade here, but it could be an A, like I said, by week 4. So I don't mind James going with that grade. So let's move on to wide receivers. All right. Well, another I think that draft for Eric was at the 2013 or 15 maybe that he got Hopkins and Kelsey, and there was just only 2 picks. Yeah. So we'll get to Kelsey later. But you want to talk about knocking out of the park with still having a stud in Hopkins. Still leading this unit. I think still a mid to high, maybe low end one at worst in the wide receiver community. So I'm be happy with that as my wide receiver 1. Do you guys have anything else to add about Hopkins?
It's Hopkins, man. He's the Texans are idiots. Can we say that for giving up on him?
We can. We can.
Like,
that's a good point to add. The Texans are just dog shit franchise.
Yeah,
so.
Hopkins is going to continue to ball with Murray there. So he's a locked in wide receiver 1 for the next few years. So.
Yeah, we saw over so many years that it doesn't matter who's throwing him the ball. He's going to be a wide receiver 1. And for him to be, wide receiver 10 in a brand new system with no off season, he just proves that he's always going to eat no matter what. It's that simple.
Yeah. Didn't even get a lot of touchdowns last year. Like it was a lot. It was on yards. Was a lot of his points.
Yeah.
But Murray threw it a lot, and he was still getting a ton of. He was targeted out the ass last year.
I was just going to say my note here is that he's got 10 games with double-digit targets. Like you just can't pass up that volume combined with that talent. It's ridiculous.
6 touchdowns. That was his least in a while, but still, 1,400 yards receiving.
As an owner of Christian Kirk, I do think that the Cardinals are drafting wide receiver to help take some of those target burdens off of him. Well, Larry still hasn't re-signed, so I think
Larry's coming to the Bucks.
Larry's coming to the Bucks. That could happen though. So again, I think they're going to be drafting wide receiver, but I think it actually could help Hopkins get better quality targets. So he's a locked and loaded 1. I'm going to skip Thielen because we have a good bit to say on Thielen. because it really means a lot to this team, that trade and what that went
Yeah,
on. So
that's true.
we'll talk about that in a minute. Justin, you want to talk to me about Galladay on the fucking Giants? So
Yeah.
Eric, before you guys talk about that, Eric has the most incestual team in the league. He
I
has
hate
a
it.
ton of Giants.
Ooh,
He has
that's not good.
He has at one point had a ton of Lions, but with Carry On and Kenny Galladay either losing value or leaving, he now does not have a lot of Lions.
And Marvin,
Also, he had Marvin Jones at that time
Jones,
too.
yeah.
He has Evan Ingram, who's also a Giant. It's very, like I said, a very incestual team. A lot of players from the same team. So Galladay is one of Eric's Giants with Barkley and Evan Ingram. So how do you feel about that? 3 Giants. Is he going to be? He's not going to be starting Ingram, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But he will be starting Galladay. And how do you project for him? Is he keep his value going to the Giants?
I think he does to a degree, but and I will say, I would expect like a physical return to form, but it's doubtless that he's going to a worse offense where he might not be the focal point. In Detroit, he became the focal point. He was the guy. And now there's, like you said, not just on this team with Ingram and Saquon, like just on the Giants with Ingram and Saquon and Shepard and Slayton.
Yeah,
there's more mouths to feed. There's just so many more people to get the ball. And the offense is worse, and it's a downgrade at quarterback. I think he has the talent and the ability to become the guy, but coming off from being hurt all year and moving to a worse offense with a worse quarterback with more mouths to feed, I think that's kind of a simple calculus that I would not expect him to have the same production he had in his best days in Detroit as a Giant in his first year, at least.
I think it's a fair assessment. James, do you have anything disagree with that, or do you echo that same sentiment?
Yeah, pretty much agree. I mean, the only positive that I would say is the Giants know they have to make a leap this year. Like, the owner has come out and said it. Daniel Jones knows this is kind of his put up or shut up year. Maybe they're trying to force some balls to Galladay. The Giants clearly have a need for somebody to take over in the passing game, and Galladay obviously profiles as a one. I do think there's a little concern that this whole year he was injured and his contract year, like, he kind of just loafed through the whole year. I mean, maybe that's
they were lame dunking it too, kind of.
Yeah, it was a weird year for the Lions, but Galladay is a supreme talent. I just I do worry with Daniel Jones throwing him the ball if this year it's going to be good. Now, what actually might be best case scenario for Galladay going forward for Eric is, Daniel Jones really shows his true colors and they move on, get a new quarterback in the future, and maybe he can throw to Galladay. But for this year, I think Galladay is appropriately Eric's wide receiver 3 on this list right now.
You can even call him as 4. I mean, I can make an argument for Woods over Galladay.
Yeah,
so
actually, you're right.
If you're really down on Galladay,
Bobby Trees.
Yeah, if you're really down, you can get my guy Bobby Trees in there as the 3. I mean, I even like Ayuk enough to argue that I think Ayuk could profile as a more consistent player week to week in the Shanahan offense.
I don't think that's a crazy statement.
Than a boomer bust on the Giants and a Galladay. We have a lot of flex spots, so Eric may be starting both if he wants to. We talked about that running back core kind of being shallow, so he may be just starting a lot of these guys, but these aren't bad guys to start. So, let's double back to Thielen. I want to talk about that a little. We're not going to get into team building and philosophy and all that deep shit here, but like right now, the league, you talk about the butterfly effect in this league, and the league's completely different if Eric does not trade for Adam Thielen. He traded, I'll bring up the exact thing so I don't talk out of my ass, but he traded at least the first. That first, I believe, is materializing this year in 110.
Yes,
and
Dustin has that pick.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, because it was a trade made 2 years ago. It was not done.
2019, October 2019. So during that season, it was they're trying to get it for that season. But as we know, that just because you make a win now move, that doesn't mean it's only for that moment. Those players don't just die after that year. A guy like Thielen was still going to be a locked and loaded 2 with upside going in, fantasy wide receiver 2 with upside going in. So that trade was a first and a fourth. And that kind of was the difference in their seasons this year. Dustin and Eric played in a play-in game to get in at the end of the season.
The de facto play-in game.
I don't think that play-in game's even a thing if that trade doesn't happen, because that player is now going to be drafted for Dustin. So that player would not be able to impact and change things. So it's just
It's weird how it
Coulda, woulda,
happens, man.
shoulda, but that's the kind of bold moves sometimes teams need to make to get into playoff contention year after year and championship contention. And, kudos to Eric for kind of making that move for an older wide receiver, a white one too, and really
Wow.
hitting on it. And that, like I said, I think Thielen was a consistent producer for Eric this year that
It was a
doesn't
key
make
player to his
playoffs
team.
without him.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's me on Thielen. If anyone wants to add to that, please, James, Justin.
Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead, James.
Well, yeah. The only thing I was going to say on Thielen was I remember myself. I almost made a move for him in that year when Dustin was shopping him. But it's a solid player even going forward for Eric with Thielen. I think Justin Jefferson's ascension actually helps Thielen because I think it takes some of the pressure off where it doesn't just have to be Thielen, going forward. So I think it's a solid player even for the next couple of years.
I agree, and that's actually the point I was going to make there is that I 100% believe it helps him because he doesn't have to be the guy. And that's good because I don't think he can be the guy for that much longer. And I think we saw that. I think he had 14 touchdowns this year.
That's insane.
Which is insane. And I think that production masked his lack of production in the other aspects of the game in terms of receptions and yardage because he had 9 games under 60 yards, which is not what you want in a wide receiver 1 or 2. And he only had 3 games over 100. So he ended up as a top 10 wide receiver because he had those 14 touchdowns. But I would expect some regression on that count with or without Jefferson. And I just think if he has the year he had this year, but with 7 touchdowns instead of 14, which is still a fine year, he's not a not a top 15 receiver. But he doesn't need to be because Jefferson's there.
Yeah, and that'll, like you said, help extend his career into being more of a just a 2-possession receiver, red zone guy. But there's nothing wrong with that. Really good points to add on Thielen. We'll circle back to my guy Bobby Trees here. I think him and Cup are both just solid wide receivers. I don't think anyone's really 1 or 2. I just think they're both integral members of that offense and of that wide receiving core. I think they're both great players to have and players that are just great to slot in that wide receiver 3 role and set in and forget it. Big fan of Bobby Trees in redraft too, so I'll take him fucking this year. I don't care.
I love him too. Yeah, I love him too. And I think I always think of Robert Woods as kind of like an unsexy pick. I think he's kind of like not a rich man's, but a richer man's DJ Moore. Like he's not going to be a top 5 receiver, but he's not going to be 17 like DJ Moore. He's going to be around 10, and he's going to be the same type of player where he's just going to consistently get you those those decent games every week that are going to help your team. I love consistency like that in fantasy football.
Absolutely. Yeah. With all our flex spots, this is a guy that you want to have on your team that, he can always help fill either that wide receiver 3 spot or the flex. So,
and I think we'll only see improvement with Stafford because Stafford's an improvement.
So that's a great point.
I think he could easily be a top 10 receiver this year.
I agree with that. Definitely a great wide receiver to have. Eric put in the graphic as the 4, and if Galladay hits his potential, he will be the 4. I think for almost any other team in the league, with the exception of maybe me, maybe Dan, Robert Woods would be most people's 3.
He'd be some people's 2.
Maybe James with Lockett. That's another really fucking good player comparison. But for most people, he's a locked and loaded 3. And like Justin just made a great point. If he's your 2, I'm not even making fun of you as long as your 3 is another like similar type player. Like if you had Lockett Woods as your 2-3 and flipped them, I wouldn't say a word one way or the other. I think these are all good fine players that we just mentioned right there. I like Ayuk if anyone wants to take the floor on him, but I'm happy to speak on him. James, you want to talk about my guy Brandon Ayuk?
Right. The thing that I was like pleasantly surprised while watching Ayuk was how much they did use him in like those like jet sweeps and short little running plays. Like it shows that Shanahan and the 49ers value him as part of their style of offense, which is what you want. And Eric doesn't care how he gets his points, rushing, receiving, kick return, touchdowns, whatever. It's great. That's with Ayuk is another one of those classic Eric picks. Like it is a player. He's even said, I didn't love the player coming out of the draft, but like the value was there in our draft. He was a 1st round pick in the NFL draft. So Eric's like, hey, he's still here in the middle of the 2nd in ours.
You're
it's a good
drafting
pick culture.
Shanahan too at
You're
that
drafting
point as
Shanahan,
well, which is
and
half the battle. I'll do
yeah.
that all day.
Yes, so Ayuk is a good player to kind of like, as Thielen's career maybe starts to wind down, Ayuk maybe is the guy that kind of takes that mantle, and that's how you want to build a team. Is as some of your receivers get a little over the hill, you're backfilling them with the plethora of guys in the second and third, and it looks like Ayuk is going to be a guy who
He'll
can
just
be
be a
part of
contributor.
Yeah,
I don't ever project him to be a wide receiver 1, but that's
No,
okay.
That's okay.
Especially when you got like fell into Eric's lap like that. You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
So I think Eric, he's a great. His athleticism was really shocked me last year. He had a lot of good hurdles. He had a really good run after the catch. And guys like that in Shanahan's offense, he makes use.
They're going to get the
them.
ball.
So,
yeah, he's going to find a way to make use of that talent.
I am a Debo stan. I'm a huge fan of Debo, but I think him and Ayuk make two of the best like possession, run after the catch, quarterback friendly receivers in the league. So I'm a big fan of both of them.
That's fair, yeah.
We talked about Jalen Hurts, and here's another Jalen on the same team catching those balls. Yeah. Jalen Reagor, Justin. I want to say you had 2-3 last year. Or did you trade that? You had that, right?
I think I had that.
That must have been when you took Burrow, right?
2-3. Correct.
Like that's
was Jalen Reagor on your board? Like, why did he fall? Why did Ayuk fall? These are two players that Eric fell. 2 first-round receivers in real life.
What was 2-2? I just looked. Reagor was 2-2, and Ayuk was 2-7.
Okay, so
Ayuk fell because Alex took Brian Edwards.
We know why they fell, but Justin was one of the people who let them fall too. In a way, I let them fall, but I took Pittman, who was another high drafted wide receiver. Like you took Burrow, that's a fine thing, but why didn't you take like Reagor or Ayuk? I mean, I didn't take him because I thought Pittman profiled more as a 1 than either player. What drove you away from these guys?
I don't think anything drove me away from them. I think I was driven towards Joe Burrow by way of the fact that my quarterback room was garbage and Andrew Luck retired, and I was trying to hold out hope, just like the Colts were when Phillip Rivers retired. They called Andrew Luck back, and they were like, "Are you coming back?" And because that's why I had him. I was like, "I'm going to go pick him up again." But I needed Joe Burrow. It was, and I'm sitting there with Michael Thomas and Chris Godwin. I'm not thinking like I need Jalen Reagor. I'm thinking I need Joe Burrow because and I needed him. So nothing drove me away from these guys. Nothing drove me away from them.
Another person thought, why did these guys fall? Because they were 2 first-round receivers in real life. They fell right into Eric's lap. I took other wide receivers drafted later than them. You make a great point. Burrow was just a better pick for your team at the time. I was just wondering if you were thinking too, like, damn, because you're a value guy. You like the value, and I bet you were thinking first-round draft capital like this. Why is this tumbling?
We know how Jalen Reagor fell because Denzel Mims was taken in the first round, things like that. Like
Dan mid surgery calls in to pick up Jefferson, trade up for Jefferson.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, looking back on it, hindsight's obviously 2020, but I don't think the Vikings war room. We saw the clip of them laughing at the Eagles taking Jalen Reagor. So I'm not mad about not taking him. Obviously the Vikings didn't love him, but I think the Eagles, just to move into like the more general about it, that wide receiver room is a who's who of unproven incompetence. Greg Ward had some great games. And it was Travis Fulgham City, exactly, for 2 or 3 games, and
then they just benched him, stopped using him.
Yeah, and then I just don't know what's going to happen on that team. And they have a questionable passing attack and a questionable red zone offense. And I just don't know who's going to – it's just impossible to pick who's going to be the guy. But, obviously he's a talented kid and he's young, so it's a fine dynasty asset to have for now.
Yeah, no one's hating Eric. These are great value picks where Eric got him. It's just – it's funny that how some guys fall and – the rich get richer. These could be 2 players 3 years from now that are consistent contributors for Eric going into their second contract with these teams or into free agency as still contributors. And they fell to the mid-second round pick despite having real life first round capital. We'll go through these next guys quick because they're a little bit lesser guys. Sterling Shepard, Preston Williams, as far as wide receivers, like 7 and 8 for Eric. That's awesome guys to have there. Like a guy who's more solid, like you can start him if you have to. And Shepard, a guy with some upside in Williams. Guys have anything to add about those?
I'll jump in here on Tyler Johnson as a Bucs fan.
Great.
Tyler Johnson looks like he especially if Antonio Brown doesn't re-sign, it looks like Tyler Johnson's going to get the opportunity. And a wrinkle on the Bruce Arians style of offense, the slot receiver is very important with blocking, right? And Godwin is that guy for the Bucs. Tyler Johnson is the direct backup. It's not, people think, oh, Scotty Miller, he's the white receiver, he's the slot receiver. No, Scotty Miller just is the run straight downfield receiver. Tyler Johnson is actually the guy over the middle who the Bucs really value he's the Bucs leverage if Chris Godwin wants $25 million next year, let's say, or something stupid. Tyler Johnson could be a great hold, in 2 years going forward. And even this year, he's going to have some value because I don't know if the Bucs are going to re-sign Brown. Maybe they take a Kadarius Toney or Terrence Marshall in the first, and you got to compete with Johnson. But Johnson proved as a rookie his value. He made an incredible catch on third down against the Saints in the divisional round. Drew the game-winning pass interference penalty against the Packers in the NFC Championship game. Tyler Johnson was in the biggest moments as a rookie, and I think the arrow is only pointing up for him.
I completely agree with that.
I agree too. And just to add one small thing to that, something that I noticed from watching those games and from watching like the press conferences and stuff like that and hearing Brady talk about him, he was earning Brady's trust towards the end of that year. And he's the type of receiver that Brady likes a lot. So
Absolutely.
if he can get more opportunity on the field to keep earning that trust, it's hard to see fantasy relevance now and this year behind such an arsenal of weapons. But, there is a lot of possibility there for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, as a Mike Evans owner, he gets hurt every year. So Tyler Johnson could have a week where, hey, Mike Evans is hurt or whatever. Godwin's had some injuries. Tyler Johnson could have some nice, even spot start weeks if guys get hurt because he's going to be being tied to that offense.
Definitely agree. So let's give this a grade. I am going to go with an A, and I could make an argument for an A plus, but only because this isn't the Hopkins of 2016.
Yeah.
Do I just give this an A?
Last offseason, this is probably an A plus because Galladay's still in the Lions. Hopkins maybe is a year younger.
Totally agree.
Well, we're not going to get into this because this is a fucking bag of worms and we're almost to an hour now. But if this is Tyreek Hill's there, this is an A plus, the slam dunk best unit in the league.
Oh my God.
But the clean giveaway. So we are at least not being ruled by Eric for fucking 4 out of 5 championships.
Holy shit.
Because we would be absolutely fucked right now if he had Tyreek Hill for what he gave. Disaster. So good thing for the rest of us, the 9 of us. And this is still, I think, a top 2-3 unit in the league. I'd ride or die with this unit any day. And I would say this is the backbone, if you want my opinion. This is the backbone of Eric's championship, except for Kelsey, but we'll get into him later. Yeah. So I'm giving this an A. Justin?
I also give it an A. I was actually going to give it an A plus until you just until we just talked about, comparatively to, 4 years ago, D-Hop and, last year, Kenny Golladay, regardless of whether Tyreek Hill is there or not is irrelevant. It's a good point. But these players are here, Hopkins, Thielen, and Golladay are not what they were, last year or 2 years ago. So I can't give it an A plus, but A certainly. And it is a great unit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll stick with the A as well. Yeah. It's got everything, the startable guys at top with Hopkins, Thielen, Golladay, and Robert Woods. There's some nice high upside young guys with Ayuk and Jalen Reagor, and even Tyler Johnson, and then even like these couple of random asshats like Preston Williams and Sterling Shepard, who it's enough value. Hey, they
get into the dog days of the season. We're all starting asses.
Yeah, so those are fine players that we could have. This group is an A.
It's a really good unit. Like I said, the backbone of the team, except for segue to tight ends. Arguably one of the most important fantasy assets in the league, and Travis Kelce. James, you want to take the floor on what is definitely the best fantasy tight end right now?
I mean, this is the reason why Eric's had a little mini reign of terror. I would say the biggest criticism that we can lay on Eric's team is that in the last 5 years of our dynasty league is that he maybe should have even more than 2 championships because if he's had I checked before I got here, Kelce has been number 1 4 out of the last 5 years at tight end, and the other year he was number 2, probably because it was a crazy Gronk year or maybe it was Kittle. I didn't check.
What year was that?
I think it was 2017. It said that he was not number 1, so that may have been Gronk's last good year. I don't recall. But tight end. But this is this is why Eric has been one of the top teams. Is he always has Kelsey has the advantage. Like it's such a huge advantage week in and week out, knowing that you have the top player at that position, and he plays like a wide receiver. Like he could have been a wide receiver one for a lot of teams this year, if he was that. So this is, Eric appropriately names him his Lord and Savior because that's what he is.
Justin, do you have anything to add about Kelsey?
I don't. He's exactly what James said. He is who we thought he was. He's going to be a top tight end. He's a fantastic dynasty asset to have. He's, along with the receiving core, the anchor of this team, and I'm extremely jealous of him.
He's 31. So,
he's 32 this
he's
season.
not going to be a spring chicken. He's older than Gronk or just barely younger than Gronk, I think is the stat.
About the same age, yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't take the physical beating, so he should last a little longer because he plays more obviously in the slot and stuff. Not your true inline blocking tight end, but yeah, You're right. He is over 30, so
he's not in blocking on field goals. We'll put it that way.
But Eric still has good depth though behind him with a guy like Evan Ingram. But anybody have anything else to add on Kelsey? I think you guys did a good job of.
I mean, we could suck his dick for another.
We could be here all day talking about how excellent the Chiefs' offense is and how it works, and another incest that Eric had was the Tyreek Hill, Damian Williams, and Travis Kelce Chiefs stack too. Like I said, Eric has been a very incestuous team over time. He finds an offense he likes, and
maybe that's what happens when you move Dumbo, Texas.
He loves the Lions. He loves the Giants. We're talking about premium offenses here.
Yeah.
The Giants again, another fourth Giants player for Eric. Fourth with Sterling Shepard, Kenny Galladay, Saquon, and now Evan Ingram. Justin, want to talk about our guy Evan?
I would love to talk about Evan Ingram. He's still only 26, but he's had a lifetime of failure to meet expectations.
Very well said.
It's almost incredible to me that when I was thinking about this, I was looking at it, and I've been burned by Evan Ingram in redraft, so I kind of fucking hate him. Everybody does their time with Evan Ingram. But I think if I told you in 2017, or if I told Eric in 2017 when he drafted Evan Ingram, that Evan Ingram in 2020 would play every single game for the New York Giants, he would lead the team in targets, Eric would be ecstatic. And then I would tell him that he would end up as tight end number 19 on the year despite that. And it would be mind-blowing. Doesn't make any sense. He led the team in targets, and he played every game. The first time in his career playing every game of the season.
That's
he was tight end 19.
He actually didn't get hurt this year.
That's how awful the Giants' offense is. There's so many other weapons, and there's just no production. It's crazy. And Eric is so good in this league, and he has half their team. It doesn't make any sense.
He's spawning us points.
I mean, he has almost all fantasy relevant players from the Giants.
It's true.
So.
Well, he's missing Daniel Jones for his Exodia Giants trump card over us. So, thankfully, honestly, there's not much to say. I think Chris Herndon has kind of had his time. He's not really much. Dawson Knox and Harrison Bryant, I think, are really nice. Even Bryson Hopkins are just nice random dart throws at tight end. I'm still, though, I think this is an A, maybe an A plus even, just if you really like the depth of Evan Ingram. So
yeah, I was gonna go A plus just because it's Kelsey, and then there's plenty of depth with the rest of these guys. So
yeah,
A plus for me.
I can definitely give this an A plus. I have no issue with that. Justin?
I'll give it an A plus as well. Kelsey gives you a floor of an A minus. No, if Kelsey was the only tight end on the team, it's an A minus no matter what, and it's only an A minus because Kelsey's 32.
If it was Travis Kelce and Vincent Patronani, it would be an A minus. Like
Absolutely.
That would be an A minus tight end room. It might be an A. It might be an A. Vincent was a willing blocker.
And if you block, you get on the field.
Get on the field. That's what you want. You want those snap counts.
But Kelsey makes it a floor of A minus, and the depth. I just hated on Evan Ingram for 90 seconds, but the depth is there. He's got 4 other bodies at the position, which is such a wasteland. I say wasteland every time we talk about tight end, but it's true. And to have 4 guys there, and a lot of them are younger with some potential upside, it's an A plus.
Yeah, I could see it. I'm gonna go with A though, still, just because I think that Evan Ingram is on a similar. How do I say this? I think by the time we talk about Kelsey being out of the league, I don't think Evan Ingram, he may not have any value. And this could be a net nothing at tight end if Eric if one of these guys don't hit by then. But we're not who gives a shit about that? Like
Yeah,
right now, the next
Kelsey's
2 to
got-
3 years, Eric has
Yeah.
an A, and that's why I said like I can go A plus. Like you could talk me into an A plus. I could do it. I could do it. I just don't really like Evan Ingram.
I
Like
don't.
you
Oh
just
no,
said,
Evan Ingram. Evan
he's
Ingram
just
has
done
no
for
value
me.
to me. I wouldn't give
Yeah,
Eric.
no
I
value.
wouldn't give Eric a 2025 third round pick for. I hate this man so much.
I hate
Dawson
you.
Knox is the future. No, I'm kidding, obviously, but I agree with you. I don't like Evan Ingram, but there's just so much depth here behind such a great tight end. I love it.
I mean, Kelsey, we don't need to be a tight end premium league for the value of Kelsey to really shine. And I think if we were a tight end premium league, it would have really Eric would have been a 1 or 2 seed and probably have really ran away in the playoffs. So
he would have 5 straight titles if this was a tight end premium league, and then we would have disbanded the league. So yeah,
disbanded by then. Beat me in the lobby. It's over. Kelsey, I think, is the disparity and the real difference maker in Eric's team. Like Tom Brady, again, was 7 last year. Not a difference maker. We talked about like Lamar Jackson on Sean's podcast. Everyone's swinging dick with a pretty decent quarterback, except Alex. He doesn't know they exist yet. But everyone else is swinging with a pretty decent quarterback. And then everyone usually has a comparable stable of running backs and wide receivers to be competent. But the difference week in, week out is Travis Kelce for Eric's team.
Absolutely.
I have Darren Waller, the only guy who's been able to even fucking hold a candle to this guy, and still he has like a solid point gap on Darren Waller because that's the difference in points. I never thought we'd see a tight end as dominant as Gronk, which segue, he was the tight end who beat Travis Kelce in that 1 year.
Yeah.
By like 8 points in standard. At PPR, Kelce won, but
of course.
Either way, like he is the difference that gives Eric the edge in our league every week, and the fact that Eric surrounded him with a B plus was the worst grade we gave out. Outside of this, we can't say anything bad. So yeah, I think that writes the book on that. We'll real quick here breeze through some defenses on his team too. For Eric's team on defenses, he has the Colts and the Chiefs. I just think those are 2 solid, great defenses kind of to rotate in and out and play based on matchup. So I would give them probably at least a B minus too, because I like the Colts defense upside.
Yeah. With defenses, like you usually want to try to tie yourself with all right, do they have a good, elite player on their defense? And the Colts do with a Darius Leonard. So it's obviously we're not playing IDP. So a guy like Darius Leonard is who you kind of attach yourself with Colts defense.
What's his name too in the front 7 who they traded for from the Niners?
DeForest Buckner. Yes,
DeForest Buckner, another good player. So they got a good front 7, and they want to win through defense. So you want a team that invests through defense and wants to keep it low. So that's why I said I feel comfortable with the B minus. I could even be talked into a B because I'm a big fan of the Colts upside. Just anything to add on those defenses?
Yeah, I would have said BB plus. The Colts finished 5 this year. If you have a top 5 defense that you could plug in, and the Chiefs were 12 or 13. I'm not looking at my notes anymore, but they were a top half unit. And so if you have a top 5 and another top half to spell them for matchups, I think that's a B at least.
Yeah, I'm gonna go B, actually B plus even. Then I didn't know they were that high up. Wow, that is a nice unit. So
B is fair.
Get into the draft capital real quick. He doesn't have a ton, but he has some two good picks in this draft. Yep. 2 top 20 picks. Can't say anything bad about that as a championship contender. I mean, that team was a championship contender regardless of who these 2 people are. These 2 people could be Alex Morales and Scott Potter, and these would still be a championship team. I think Eric can kind of go wherever he wants to go with these. He can go BPA all the way. Take what falls to him again if he wants.
Yeah. Well, this is Eric's bread and butter is this middle of the 2nd round. This is, as the league's been going on all these years, he always tries to get back into this range because he knows this is where Brandon Ayuk falls every year. That type of player is going there's Kadarius Toney, Terrence Marshall, Elijah Moore, some of these random asshole wide receivers who get drafted in the back of the 1st. One of them could be there at 2-5, maybe running backs there. This is a good spot to be in the draft, 2-5 and 2-10.
I agree.
I totally agree. And the benefit to the other 9 of us is that Eric won't have anything to do for the first hour and a half of the draft. So he will make it fun for us on the stream.
Yes, that is key.
So let's talk about real quick before we end the pod. where do you have this team, Justin? Do you have this as your number one team? Is he? Just because you put him one doesn't mean he's obviously a lock to repeat. But would you say that right now, power rankings wise, he is your favorite team going in?
I would say if this team did not have Evan Ingram, it would be the number one team in the league. But he's a fucking anchor. No, I think I think it is the number one team in the league. For my money, it is. It's just so solid from top to bottom. He's got a lot of youth. He's got a lot of classic, great veteran leadership in the locker room. I can't say he's number two because he's such a staunch supporter of the Hurricanes, so it's number one for me.
James?
Yeah, I got to go with one here. This is the team to beat until kind of proven otherwise. I like to be. Yes, he hates Evan Ingram. Same page. The champion has had to go through Eric's team the past 5 years. I'll run through it quick for the boys back home.
Give us the history.
2016 beats Justin for finally the blowouts finally getting off the schneid. 17 loses the fabled high scoring game versus Alex in the semis on Alex's way to getting it. In 18 loses the championship game to Tibbs. 19 I squeaked by him in the semis with beating him there, and then last year, the luck kind of reverses course, and Eric gets hot late in the year when previous years he hadn't. So the champion has either beaten Eric or it's been Eric the past 5 seasons, and I feel like some similar dynamic will happen this year. Either maybe Eric either wins again, or if someone knocks him off in the playoffs, that team could be one that's there at the end. This is a team that's going to be there. Dynabook has them as the favorite, and probably going to stay that way, barring something crazy happening on draft weekend.
Yeah, I definitely have no issue with this team being one. It's either my one or two. I put it in my one, my pre-draft power rankings, and I still have it there unless the draft, like you said, would really be what could change that. This team has that edge, like I said, in Kelsey, and the only team we talk about teams in this league, and Eric has a lot of stuff planned with drafts and power rankings. In my opinion, there are tiers in our league, and the top tier is Dan and Eric. And the other tiers, we could break them up later, but we're not here for that. We're here to talk about Eric's team. And the top tier is Dan and Eric. And when I talk about those teams, the fundamental difference is I have to go with Kelsey over the Gronk and Arians offense. That could goose you at the worst possible time when you need it most. And if you're playing Eric and Kelsey gets 21, which is like routine, like I say that number, like you're like 21 from a tight end. Are you serious? No, that's stop. If you get 21 from Kelsey, you're like, you know what? It could have been worse actually. It could have been like a 30 almost. So we're all right.
You're like, I'm glad he played like Evan Ingram.
No, if Evan Ingram was doing that, God. No, so I think that's kind of the edge that I really give to Eric in their teams head to head, and that's why I think we all kind of go with Eric in calling Eric the one, because I think we all have Dan as the two. And
it's
for
hard,
me,
it's
the Kelsey difference. It's the Kelsey difference, the tight end difference, and I think that the championship will run through Eric again. He will be there at the end of the season. The common denominator is, like you said, he lost to the championship or lost to the champion or was the champion in every season. And I think like
he's got a couple of points titles in there. He's I think even this 2 or 3 different points titles where he scored the most points during the year.
Wasn't the best record in sleeper in there too? I want to say like wasn't he like 11-2 or 3 a few years ago? Maybe it was someone else.
Yeah, because the first year of sleeper was Tibbs' title, and I believe Eric was the one because Eric was the 1 seed and the points leader that year. But then Tibbs got him in the playoffs, and then the year after was when I got the 1 seed and the points and everything. Eric was, I think he was like the 4 seed actually that year.
He was 11-2, which in 2018.
Okay, so that was the first year in sleeper. Yeah, that was the year he lost to Tibbs in the final. Then
11-2, it scored 2,000 points that year and lost. So
crazy.
Like you said, that's testament to
hot at the right time.
Yeah, it is about getting hot at the right time.
Staying hot at the right time.
What I was going to say is the common theme is Eric's always there. He's always, because he's so deep, he's always a threat to contend. He's not like, I drafted 4 running backs at 1-1 all in a row, and now I'm ready to compete. Hurdy-dirty-dur. But like, he has nothing else behind it, so no one fucking cares. Like, let him jerk off real quick, and he'll be done in 15 seconds. You can move on. But Eric's tough. Eric, he doesn't quit, man. Every year he's reinforcing it, whether it's with late picks, early picks. He's definitely right now, I think, the hot team and the team that really ended the 20 teens, and now starting the 2020s. It's a nice little reign of terror. He's already got the ship. So, I really don't have anything much else to add on Eric's team. I think we all agree it's the top team. And if you really don't think it's that way because of one thing or the other, you have to still give it top 2 or 3. Anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, just a last thought to piggyback on that. It's just like, even then, if you want to call it 2, you have to at least look at the historical context and the significance of what James pointed out over the past 5 years. Is Eric's shown that he has been the team to beat over the past 5 years. And until someone else proves otherwise, that's the case going forward as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the train runs through here in fantasy formats because it's like, come on, man. You don't have the emotion to keep it together like a real championship team. But like Eric doesn't need that. He has the raw depth that he contends every year because he's just always active on waivers and active in the draft. So it's a good manager. James, anything to add?
No, I mean, the final thing I'll say is picking up James Robinson saved his season. Alex dropped him for reasons unknown. Could have found a way to keep him on that roster. Eric, drafts him, drops him, picks it back up again. That was a season saver, and that's how you do it. When your team get some injuries, I don't care how good your depth is, you always have to be on the waivers. And Eric kind of showed and reinforced that point again this year. So, yeah,
no, totally agree with you, James. So that's a great point to finish with. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll I think this will be the last edition that I'm going to be on until the draft. So I will see you guys draft night. And I think Justin, the Hurricanes, is in the same boat. So we will see you guys draft night on the Discord. So I hope to see everybody there. Thanks for listening.